Hey party people, this video I have a guest lecture here to show you how to sew 3 beautiful but slightly advanced seams. And I want to take a minute to introduce today's guest lecturer. Belu is a technical designer who studied industrial design in Argentina before moving to Spain to work as a product developer for Burberry for 6 years. She continued to work for many other brands including Pepe Jeans, Zara, and Karl Lagerfeld brand. In 2016, she co-founded a company called ABC Seams, and ABC Seams, they study, develop, and codify sewing seams for improved communication within the industry. And you can check out their free seams gallery at abcseams.com, or if you're really serious about this stuff, I highly recommend that you go get their book at the link that I'll drop in the description box below. In this video, Belu is going to show you how to sew 3 beautiful seams, the rolled hem, the bound hem, and the Hong Kong finish. And they're beautiful. They're a tiny bit advanced, but you know how I feel about that. Hashtag if you're first one sucks, you're right on track. Hashtag always be practicing. Hashtag practice not magic. And you know, they're totally worth learning because they are actually used frequently and they lend a really beautiful professional finish to your garments. Now listen, there are variations to each of these 3 seams. So if you look at the Hong Kong finish and you're like, I didn't learn it quite like that. Yes, there are variations to all 3 of these. Belu, in this video, she's going to teach us how to sew one version of each one. And what I suggest you do is to watch this video, learn it, practice, and then go check out abcseams.com for more information on the variations of these seams. And don't forget, please like this video if you want more construction-related videos like this one. Now, on to Belu.
Hi there, my name is Belu. I'm the technical designer at ABC Seams, and today we are going to talk about 3 complex but very useful seams. Seam number 1, roll hem. The roll hem is a very little tiny hem that is made by folding twice the edge of the fabric. The structure of this hem is exactly the same as the double fold hem, the basic hem, the first hem we learned to do, but the only difference is that the roll hem is very narrow. This hem works better on lightweight fabrics like shirts, like organza, chiffon, voile, also on silks and lightweight cotton, for example. And you will find it mainly on women clothing because it's quite feminine. For example, bottom of ruffles, skirts, flowy skirts mainly, or dresses, and also some accessories like napkins or scarves. If you're a beginner, you better start with lightweight cotton. I think it has the right amount of stiffness to work with this technique. You want to avoid slippery fabrics. They are going to make you feel frustrated. And also start with straight hems, and then as long as you get used to the technique, you can try with curves and fabric cut on the bias. There are 2 techniques to make this hem. Number 1 is by using your regular foot, the foot that comes with your sewing machine. And the second technique is by using a roll hem foot. Either way, you are going to work always with the right side of the fabric facing down. And here what is important to keep in mind is that the key to get a very nice, very narrow and even hem is to control the tension of the fabric as long as you sew. I will show you how, and let's go for it. Technique number 1, roll hem by using the regular foot. For this technique, we are doing a curved hem, so the first thing we need to do is a stay stitch to keep the shape. Before starting, we want to check the tension of the thread. We are sewing a single layer, so the tension will be 2 and the stitch length 2.5. Then we trim off the excess of fabric, so we cut 2 or 3 millimeters away from the stitch. Now back at the machine, we fold up 1/8 of an inch the edge of the fabric. We should be able to see the previous stitch. and then we sew right over it. This time we are sewing 2 layers of fabric, so we have to increase the tension of the thread from 2 to 4. As I mentioned before, one of the most important issues for this hem is to get in control of the tension of the fabric. If you let the tension show to the machine, the fabric will get too relaxed and the hem will be wider and wider, especially when sewing curves. So what I'm doing is I slightly pull the hem backward with my right hand, then I finger press and I pull the fabric to the left with my left hand. And finally, we are doing the last stitch. We fold the edge toward the wrong side of the fabric again. We increase the tension of the thread too, because now we have 3 layers of fabric. I'll do it from 4 to 6, but anyway, it depends on the type of fabric, so you need to make your own test. And then we sew over the previous stitch once again. When I'm sewing, I'm not looking at the needle nor at the stitch. You want to look at the edge of the hem, so the top stitch will be perfectly parallel to the edge and it will be even. So now we iron it and the roll hem is done. You will see 1 top stitch from the right side and 2 stitches from the inside. Anyway, if you use a thread in matching color, you barely see the stitches. Technique number 2, roll hem by using the roll hem foot. The roll hem foot comes in 3 different sizes, 2 mm, 4 mm and 6 mm. Today we are working with a hem of 4 mm. When you use the roll hem foot, there are 2 matters for beginners to master. Number 1 is starting the hem, and number 2 is feeding the foot with the right amount of fabric. Here we can see the roll hem foot, and it has a scroll down here that allows the fabric to twist the edge as long as you sew it. First of all, we need to make a handle to hold the fabric for us. So what we do is we fold the very corner and then we take about 4 stitches there. Then bring the thread through the scroll. We move it back and forward until we can see the edge of the fabric goes into the scroll. As soon as we start sewing, we help the fabric to move forward by pulling from the handle thread that we just made. The second issue is to put the right amount of fabric into the scroll. Too much fabric will create twisted hems. But if we don't put enough fabric, it's not going to help to make the double fold hem. The key to fit the foot is to follow this angle with the edge of the fabric. Same as we did before in the previous technique, as long as we are sewing, we want to slightly pull the fabric backward with the right hand and pull to the left with the left hand. Then we press it flat, and here we have it. So here we have the first seam, the roll hem. This one is the one that we made with the regular foot, and this one is the one that we just made with the roll hem foot. Which technique I prefer? Well, it depends. If I have to sew a straight hem that is cut on the grain, I will use the roll hem foot, the second technique. But if I have to sew a curve or the fabric is cut on the bias, I will use the regular foot. It was the first technique, because even though it takes more time, I personally feel like I have more control on the fabric. So I encourage you to try both techniques and make your own choices, and let us know in the comments below. Seam number 2, Bonhem. The Bonhem is a finish that mainly what it does, it encloses the seam allowance by a binding that is usually cut on the bias. You will find this hem mainly on necklines, round necklines, armholes, bottoms of skirts or dresses, also on the side vent of polos or cuff sleeve, and some accessories too, like shoes or bags. I love this hem for 4 reasons. Number 1, it suits on almost any fabric and any kind of hem. I especially like it on heavyweight fabric because it helps to make the hem less bulky. Number 2, the binding makes the hem more resistant and stronger, and it works perfectly good on areas with a lot of stress like necklines. Number 3, this hem is not only neat on the inside, but also with the binding you can add a touch of color. And the last reason is that it's very easy to make. So for this hem, you can either buy a pre-made binding or you can make it yourself. The pre-made bias binding comes in different sizes and different materials, but it also comes in different types. One of them is the single fold bias binding, which is fold right in the middle, and the other one is the double fold bias binding. This one comes with both edges folded inward, and this one is the one that we are using for this hem. So here is the binding that we are using for this demonstration. It's a pre-made double fold bias binding. It has half of an inch in width, and that is 1.2 centimeters, and it's made of cotton. Before starting this hem, we're gonna prepare the bias binding. You'll see one of the folded edges is a little bit narrower than the other one. So we open up that fold, the narrower, and we press with the iron. Make sure the iron is not too hot, because even though we want the fold stays open, we still need to see the crease line. If we are sewing a curved edge, what we need to do before is a stay stitch to keep the shape of the hem. Step number 1, place the binding facing the right side of the fabric, I mean they are face to face, and make sure you line them up correctly along the edge. So now we are sewing right on the crease line. Then we press the binding open, and after that we fold it up towards the wrong side of the fabric and press it again. Now, back at the machine, we're gonna do a top stitching all along the edge of the binding. And to finish, we press the binding, and here we have the Bonhem. Seam number 3, Hong Kong seam. The Hong Kong seam is a construction seam that has the seam allowances open and the edges are covered by a binding. You will use this high-end seam mainly on unlined jackets, but you can also use it on the side seam of formal trousers and skirts, but they shouldn't be too tight. Why you cannot use it on tight garments? Well, what happened with this seam is that it's not too resistant to the stretchiness, so it could come apart quite easily. Same as the previous hem, the Bonhem, to make this seam you need a binding. If the seam is straight, you can cut the binding on the grain. It doesn't need to be on the bias. For this demonstration, I'm going to use a homemade binding that I previously cut on the grain. It has 1 inch in width, and let's get started. Here is the fabric. We have 2 pieces and we have the bindings. We start this seam by sewing the pieces of the fabric face to face. The seam allowance is half of an inch. We line up both pieces together and we pin them. And we are ready to sew. For the next step, we open up the seam allowance and we place the binding face to face. I want to make sure they perfectly line up, so I'm going to pin them. Now we line up the previous stitch with the side of the foot. This is our reference to get a straight, even seam. We don't look at the needle when sewing, we look at the previous stitch. It's important you do this step always with the fabric on top instead of the binding. If we sew with the binding on top, we are not able to see the previous stitch, and very probably the binding won't be even. Now we do the same on the other side. We place the binding and the fabric face to face, line up and pin, place them on the machine, and sew along. And here we have the attached bindings. Then we press the bindings. We want to make sure the seam allowance is all together and is under the binding. So press open, and then we enclose the seam allowance with the same binding and press it again. Then repeat on the other side. Now, to finish this seam, we have different options. We can do a stitch in the ditch, we can sew over this edge of the binding or on this one. This is the one that we are doing today. Just keep in mind that if the stitch is on the binding, you may want to use a top thread matching with the binding, and the under thread is going to match with your fabric. So make sure also that the tension is perfectly balanced. Then repeat on the other side. And to finish, press flat and it's done. We have a cute Hong Kong seam with a little flap. So this was a tutorial on how to sew 3 complex but very useful seams. There is a previous video that you can check. It's how to sew 8 common seams. Check the description below to find the link. And if you want to know more about seams, you can do 2 things. You can comment below, let us know which seams you would like to know more about, or let us know your comments. And you can also get this book, 101 Sewing Seams. This is a kind of catalog for seams. Here you can see different types of seams, different structures, different top stitches, and it's really helpful when you have to explain to someone else how to make your designs. Here you have the seams that we were talking today and more, and it's not a step-by-step book, but it's good to give you a better idea about the technical part of designing clothing. And that's it, guys. I hope you like this tutorial. Please like this video if you have learned something new today. Share, subscribe, comment, and you will see Zoe in the next video. See ya.